On a gray Wednesday morning in April of 2021, Caleb Rowan climbed into a tractor cab in Ford County, Illinois, and found out that a $386,000 planter can become useless without breaking a single piece of steel. The monitor woke up first, then it froze. Then it gave him a message he had never seen before. Drive module mismatch. Seed meter authorization pending. Contact dealer. That was it. No smoke, no bent shaft, no blown hose. Nothing Caleb could put a wrench on. His 24-row Prairie Star Apex planter had power. The tractor had fuel. The soil temperature was right. The forecast gave him a narrow stretch of dry weather that might not come again for 2 weeks. But the planter would not plant. Sometime after midnight, through a cellular modem, Caleb had not thought about since the day the machine was delivered, the planter had accepted an automatic software update. By morning, the new firmware no longer recognized 2 of the row control modules. The hydraulic downforce system locked itself out. The electric meters refused to engage. The machine did not think it was broken. It thought it was protecting itself. Caleb stared at the screen for almost a full minute before he called the dealership. He was 46 years old. He farmed 1,950 acres with his brother and his mother, on ground his grandfather had rented before he owned. He had come through the 2012 drought, 3 years of tight margins, and 1 operating loan that had made him feel older than he was. He was not reckless. He was not dramatic. He kept a binder for every piece of equipment, and he wrote down every repair in blue ink. But there is a kind of panic that only shows up when the ground is ready. And the machine is not. Caleb called at 6:18. The service line opened at 7. He called again at 7:01 and reached a technician named Mitch, who sounded like a man already having a bad morning. Mitch told him they were aware of the problem. He said several planters in the county had thrown versions of the same error. He said engineering was building a patch. Caleb asked how long that would take. Mitch said he did not know. Caleb asked if they could roll the update back. Mitch said, not remotely. Caleb asked when a service truck could get there. Mitch paused long enough for Caleb to hear a keyboard. Then he said, Friday afternoon. Friday afternoon was 2 days away. The forecast was not 2 days wide. Caleb had 720 acres of corn that needed to go in before the weekend rain. The hybrid was expensive because it handled cold starts well. But the seed company did not sell a hybrid that could wait inside a bag forever. Every day past his window cost him, conservatively, 0.4 of a bushel per acre per day. That sounds small until you multiply it by acres, then by corn prices, then by the note at the bank. That morning, Caleb did the math twice. It did not get kinder the second time. By 8:30, he knew he was not alone. To the west, Aaron Kiefer had a newer planter with the same architecture and a slightly different error. To the south, Mike Dunleavy had a priority service contract and still could not get a fix because the fix did not exist yet. The county extension office had taken 7 calls before lunch. The dealership had 5 trucks out and a waiting list that was growing faster than anyone could clear it. One farmer with an older vacuum planter kept running because his controller was not part of the update path. Another man with a stripped-down 6-row backup planted 140 acres while his main machine sat in the yard. And then there was Roy Beller. To understand why people still talk about Roy Beller in that part of Illinois, you have to understand what he planted with. Roy was 73 in the spring of 2021. 315 acres outside Paxton, a small, clean rectangle of ground that had been in his family since 1938. He was tall, in the narrow way old farm men get tall, all bone and tendon, with hands that looked permanently stained by grease, seed treatment, and time. He wore brown canvas pants, a faded seed corn jacket, and a cap from an elevator that had closed 15 years earlier. Roy was not famous. He was not loud. He was not the kind of man who corrected people at the coffee counter unless the correction mattered. But he had one machine everyone knew. In the back bay of his machine shed, under a patched blue tarp, Roy kept a 1984 Merit 612 chain drive planter. 12 rows, meters, ground wheel drive, no touchscreen, no remote diagnostics, no wireless subscription, no software update, no authorization code, no row-by-row hydraulic downforce. It had one central truth. When the wheel turned, the chain moved. When the chain moved, the seed plates turned. When the plates turned, seed fell into the furrow. Roy had bought the planter in 1996 for $5,300 from a retiring farmer near Watseka. He rebuilt the meters in 2005, replaced the chains in 2013, welded a cracked marker arm in 2016, and changed more bearings than he cared to count. Every March, he calibrated it with a bucket, a notebook, a stopwatch, and patience. He would jack up the drive wheel, count plate rotations, drop seed into a pail, and check the population until the numbers matched what he wanted. Then he would take the planter to the field, stop after the first 100 yards, dig the row by hand, count seeds in 10 feet, and adjust again. No computer approved the decision. Roy approved it. That did not make him anti-technology. That part matters. Roy had a light bar guidance unit on his tractor. He used a yield monitor in his combine. His daughter had put a weather app on his phone, and he checked it more often than he admitted. He had variable rate lime maps done once every 4 years, because they made sense on his ground. He was not afraid of progress. He was suspicious of permission. Ellen, after a salesman left a glossy brochure on the kitchen table in 2018. The brochure promised smoother emergence, lower seed waste, automatic section control, downforce that adapted faster than a human could think. Roy listened politely. He asked good questions. He thanked the salesman for stopping. Then, after the pickup had gone down the lane, Ellen asked why he would not at least consider it. Roy pointed through the window toward the machine shed. He said, "That old planter asks the ground one question. Are you ready? That's the only question that matters." Ellen said the new planters could do things his could not do. Roy said he knew that. He knew that. Then he asked her what the dealership schedule looked like during the first dry week of May. Ellen did not answer. Roy went back to reading the seed tags. On the Wednesday morning, Caleb Rowan's planter locked itself into an error state. Roy heard the news at Wally's Cafe in town. Farmers came in and out with the tense, clipped voices men use when the weather is beating them, and they do not want to sound afraid. Someone said the update had hit 5 machines. Someone else said 9. One man said the patch would be ready by noon. Another said the engineers were still testing it. Roy drank his coffee and said very little. At home, he checked his soil probes, of them, cheap dial thermometers from a farm auction, pushed into different fields at different depths. He checked the forecast printout on the refrigerator. He walked out behind the shed and picked up a handful of soil, squeezed it, broke it apart with his thumb, and watched how it crumbled. Then he decided Thursday morning was the morning. At 5:28 the next day, Roy opened the machine shed doors. His old 1978 tractor coughed once, caught, and settled into a steady idle. The Merit 612 came out behind it, with the blue tarp folded on the shed floor. There was no glow from a monitor, no boot sequence to accept, no green check mark from a server. Just cold air, diesel smoke, and chain links clicking over sprockets. Roy pulled into the field as the sky went pale. He planted one test pass, stopped, climbed down, and walked the row. He dug with a pocket knife in the side of his hand. He counted seeds in 10 feet. 32,100 per acre. A little light. He changed one sprocket, planted another pass, dug again. 32,800. That was close enough to what he wanted. By the time the regional product manager for Prairie Star drove past Roy's farm at 8:12 that morning, Roy had already planted 36 acres. The manager's name was Dana Huxley. She had come down from Bloomington to help the dealership triage service calls. She was smart, steady, and tired before the day started. She had 14 customers waiting, 2 engineers on speakerphone, and a dealership owner asking for updates every 90 minutes. She slowed when she saw Roy's tractor moving across the field. From the road, the setup looked almost out of place. An old tractor, a faded 12-row planter, a marker arm tracing a line through black Illinois soil. No screen in the cab large enough to watch from the shoulder. No blinking error. No service truck. No man standing beside it with his hands on his hips. Just a planter planting. Dana watched for 3 seconds longer than she had time for. Then she drove on. The patch arrived Thursday at 3:41 in the afternoon. It worked on some machines. It did not work on Aaron Kiefer's. It cleared Caleb Rowan's main screen, but 2-row units still would not authorize. A service technician made it to Caleb's yard at 7:20 that night, worked under portable lights until almost midnight, and left without the machine ready for the field. The second patch came Friday morning. Caleb started planting at 11:15. He lost roughly a day and a half. That sounds survivable. Until you remember what a planting window is. A planting window is not a meeting you can reschedule. It happens when soil temperature, moisture, forecast, labor, seed, fuel, and machine all line up. Then it closes without asking whether your service ticket has been resolved. Caleb planted hard through Friday and Saturday, chasing the rain from field to field. He got most of his corn in, not all. The last 180 acres went in wet after the rain, because he did not have another choice. Aaron Kiefer lost 3 full days. Mike Dunleavy lost 2. A younger farmer named Ben Sutter, who had rented new ground at a high cash rent and needed every acre to perform, missed the best part of the window on 420 acres. Roy Beller planted Thursday. He planted Friday. He planted Saturday morning. Last field Sunday before noon. 315 acres. No service call. No update. No downtime. Every night he pulled the planter into the shed, blew seed dust out of the meters, checked the chains, greased what needed grease, and wrote the acres in a black notebook his wife had bought him at the grocery store. That Sunday evening the rain came. By then Roy's seed was already under the ground. Now there are people who will hear that and make the wrong argument. They will say the old machine was better than the new machines. That is not what this story proves. In a normal spring, with a wide weather window and a service department that can keep up, Caleb's planter could do things Roy's could not dream of. It could shut off rows at odd field edges. It could vary population across soil zones. It could measure downforce in real time and make adjustments faster than a man could move his hand. Those features had value. The problem was not that the smart planter was useless. The problem was that it had become dependent on a chain of permission so long. Caleb could not see the end of it. The monitor had to approve the modules. The modules had to agree with the firmware. Firmware had to match the server. The server had to wait for engineers. The engineers had to send a patch. The patch had to reach the machine. The machine had to trust the patch. Roy's planter had a shorter chain. Wheel, sprocket, plate, seed, soil. That was the whole permission structure. On the Monday after the rain, the coffee counter at Wally's was full. Caleb was there. Aaron Kiefer was there. Ben Sutter sat 2 stools down, looking at his phone as if the weather app had personally wronged him. Dana Huxley had stopped in for coffee on her way to the dealership, mostly because she needed 10 minutes without a speakerphone. Roy came in at 7:10 and sat at the far end. The conversation did not stop when he entered. It bent. That is the best way to put it. For 20 minutes, the men had been talking about patches, service logs, downtime claims, yield drag, and whether anyone from the company would make it right. Dana answered carefully. She was not evasive. She did not pretend the problem was small, but she also knew exactly what she could not promise. Then Ben Sutter looked down the counter and said, "Roy, you finished before the rain." Roy stirred his coffee. He said, "Ground was fit." Aaron said, "That planter of yours doesn't have a controller, does it?" Roy said, "No." Caleb looked at him then. "How old is it?" Roy said, 84. I bought it in 96. There was a little silence. Ben said, "And it ran." Roy said, "It usually does." Dana was looking into her coffee. Then she looked up, not at Roy's planter, because it was not there, but at Roy. She said something quietly enough that the men nearest her almost missed it. "We spend a lot of time making machines smarter. I don't know that we spend enough time deciding what they should never be allowed to forget." No one laughed. No one had anything ready for that. 2 days later, Dana drove out to Roy's farm. She did not come with a sales brochure. She did not come with a service truck. She came in her own pickup and found Roy in the machine shed, cleaning seed graphite out of the planter boxes with a rag. Roy did not seem surprised. Dana asked if she could look at the planter. Roy pulled the tarp the rest of the way back. She studied the drive chains, the sprockets, the finger meters, the marker arms, the simple ground wheel that turned only when the planter moved. She asked what failed most often. Roy said, "Bearings mostly, chains if you ignore them, tires if you get cheap." Dana asked how long it took him to fix those things. Roy said, "Depends how far I am from the shed. She smiled at that, but he was not joking. Then she asked the question she had really come to ask. "Why didn't you ever upgrade?" Roy wiped his hands and looked out through the shed door toward the field. He said, "Because planting isn't about the machine. It's about the hour." Dana waited. Roy said, "A good planter that misses the hour is a bad planter that week. A plain planter that hits the hour is a good planter that week. Most years that difference doesn't show up in a brochure. Then one spring it shows up everywhere." Dana said the yield data on precision planting was real. Roy nodded. "Believe it." She said section control saved seed. Roy nodded again. "I believe that, too." She said downforce automation could improve emergence. Roy said, "I'm not arguing with any of it." Then he tapped the side of the planter box with 2 fingers. "But this thing doesn't need permission from anybody who isn't standing in this shed." That line stayed with Dana. It stayed with Caleb, too, though he did not hear it until later. Harvest made the argument harder to ignore. Roy's corn averaged 191 bushels across his 315 acres. That was not the highest yield in Ford County. It was not close. Caleb's best early planted field averaged 212. Barron's farms hit 218, where the ground had gone in on time. But the acres that missed the window told a different story. Caleb's late 180 acres averaged 184. Ben Sutter's delayed ground came in at 176. Aaron's problem field averaged 181. At $5.12 corn, a 20-bushel swing was not a mood, it was money. Roy did not win the county yield contest. He won the year he had built his system to survive. His equipment cost on that planter was effectively nothing. His repair bill was a chain, 2 bearings, and a half-day in the shed. No activation fee, no remote support package, no emergency service invoice, no depreciation schedule big enough to make him wince. That fall, Caleb bought an old 6-row backup planter at an estate auction for $4,700. His brother teased him about it. His mother did not. She asked where he was going to put it. Caleb said, "In the shed." She asked how often he thought he would use it. Caleb said, "I hope never." Then he heard himself say what he had not fully understood until that moment. "But if I need it once, I won't need anything else more." In 2023, the failure was not software. It was a hydraulic valve body that went on backorder during planting season. Not on Caleb's farm this time, on Ben Sutter's. Ben had newer equipment, better financing, and a sharper operation than people gave him credit for. He was not foolish for buying technology. The technology was good. It just was not running. On the 3rd day of waiting, Ben drove past Roy Beller's place and saw the old Merritt 612 moving across the north field behind Roy's tractor. Roy was older now and slower getting down from the cab, but the planter moved at the same steady pace it always had. Ben pulled over on the county road. He watched for a while. That evening he came to Roy's shed. Roy was checking chains, stood in the doorway and said, "Any chance I could rent that planter when you're done?" Roy did not make him ask twice. He said, "I'll finish tomorrow. You can hook to it Friday." Ben planted 160 acres with Roy Beller's planter that spring. The machine was 39 years old. It worked. When Ben brought it back, he asked Roy what it was worth. Roy shrugged. Ben said, No, I mean if you sold it. Roy looked at the planter, then at the field beyond the shed door. He said, "That's the wrong way to price a thing like that." Ben understood, or at least he was starting to, because there are tools you price by what someone would pay for them. And there are tools you price by what they prevent you from losing. Roy Bella's planter was not impressive in the way modern equipment is impressive. It did not glow at night like a cockpit. It did not draw maps. It did not send data to a dashboard. It did not promise maximum efficiency under ideal conditions. It promised something smaller. And in the wrong week, something larger. It promised that when the soil was ready, it would be ready too. That is not nostalgia. Nostalgia is when you love an old thing because it reminds you of a time you miss. Roy did not keep that planter because it reminded him of the past. He kept it because every spring, the future came down to the same question. Can you put seed in the ground today? Not after the patch. Not after the service truck. Not after the part arrives. Today. There is a lesson in that, but it is not a lesson against technology. Roy used technology when it served the field. Caleb used it too, and he kept using it after 2021. The lesson is about dependency. It is about knowing which parts of your system can be complicated and which parts must remain answerable to your own hands. Because the field does not care how advanced the machine is. It does not care what the brochure promised. It does not care how many engineers made the system smarter when the weather was patient. The field opens. The field closes. And in that narrow space, the machine that asks permission can lose to a machine that only asks the ground. Roy's Merit 612 is still in the shed outside Paxton. The blue tarp has 2 more patches now. The chains have been replaced again. The left marker arm is welded in a way that would offend a factory engineer and satisfy anyone who has ever needed a thing fixed before sunset. People call it an antique. Roy calls it a planter, because every spring, when the hour comes, it still knows what it is there to do. The field does not wait for permission. Neither does Roy's planter.